Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Happy New Year to those that I have not seen. I get to say it all month long. That's the rule. I'm Afton Thomas, Associate Director for Programs here at the Center for the Study of Southern Culture. Thank you for joining us for our first South Talk of the semester. A few announcements before I introduce today's speakers. A sign-in sheet is being passed around. If you could please make sure to sign in and to write your email address legibly. I promise not to spam you. I just want to send you a quick survey. It'll take you 2 minutes. I read all of the feedback, so please complete it. Thank you to Center staff Andrew Bryant, Rebecca Law-Cleary, and Katie McKee for their assistance with planning, promoting, and executing the South Talk series. Huge thanks to graduate students Deja Samuel, Assis Shrestha, and Andy Harper, who is not a graduate student, but one of my colleagues, for recording and editing South Talks and making them available on the Center's YouTube channel. Next week's South Talk is on Thursday, January 29th. We will host the photographer behind the beautiful exhibit in our Gamble Gallery, located just outside the door. It's called Portraits in Place, Images of Those Whom Place is Not Just Where, but Who They Are. And it features images that Mark Dolan gathered over 3 years. Dolan will discuss how a personal project to record his mother's memories of growing up in 1940s New Orleans grew to include much more. The project's aim is to honor people and their strong connection to the places they live. The opening reception and gallery walk will take place on Thursday, January 29th at 5:30 p.m. Now, to introduce today's South Talk, Tarwater at the Crossroads of Southern Folk Music and Literature. Colin Cutler is a singer-songwriter, folk musician, teacher, and storyteller based in Greensboro, North Carolina, who plays the banjo and guitar. While performing solo or with his band, Hot Pepper Jam, best band name ever, he is a versatile performer whose musical influences span the wide spectrum of American folk music, from Appalachian old time to blues, gospel, country, and rock and roll, creating what No Depression, Roots Music and Culture Journal has called one magnificent tapestry of roots music. Colin and I have been corresponding for the past year or so, and I am grateful that we were able to make this work. His visit to campus is a bit of a detour. He is currently attending the Folk Alliance International Conference in New Orleans. Thank you for adding a stop to visit further south. Cutler is joined by, I keep turning that off. Cutler is joined by UM Southern Studies and English instructor Eric Solomon. Solomon received his PhD from Emory University. He is originally from Leland, Mississippi, birthplace of Kermit the Frog, and is a lifelong Southerner. His writing and scholarship have been featured in Southern Cultures, Southern Spaces, South Atlantic Review, Studies in the Literary Imagination, Mississippi Quarterly, the North Carolina Literary Review, among others. He is the editor of the Queer Intersections series for the journal Southern Spaces, an associate editor of the Global South, a project manager for the TUOR project, and a cultural historian for the City of Atlanta's mayoral LGBTQ+ advisory committee. I think we are in for a real treat with these two. Please help me give a warm welcome to Colin Cutler and Eric Solomon.
All right, I'm going to start off with a song, if that's all right.
And I'm gonna dance. No.
So this is a song off of Tarwater. It's called Bad Man's Easy. As you may imagine, it's kind of what I did with the album was taking characters before or after the action of the story, and this is the misfit as he's driving away. where there ain't no joy. Bobby Lee, I said, as we drove down Highway 1, that tiger tattoo on his arm, he grinned as he tightened his grip on the butt of his gun. Well, we might make it to the Carolina line, but a bad man is easy to find. Have I ever told you how I feel when I hear those sirens wail? Like a pack of dogs nipping at my heels. And if I know beyond on my trail, well, a good man is hard to find and a bad man's easy. But my mama said there's two kinds of people. You're going to heaven or you're going to hell. But everybody's got at least a little killer in them. Touch me not, won't you can tell. But a good man is hard to find and a bad man is easy. Was it love, was it fear in her eyes? It was something that I'd never seen before. It was like she saw me and she recognized me and must have jerked it back when I shot it. A good man is hard to find and a bad man is easy. Well, it might be the devil, might be God, it might be both. Might be grace, might be the law, but I don't know. But a good man is hard to find. I said a good man is hard to find. Yes, a good man is hard to find. Oh, a good man is hard to find. I said a good man is hard to find and a bad man is easy. Oh, a bad man is easy. I said a bad man is easy. Yes, a bad man.
Welcome back to Oxford and Ole Miss. It's good to have you here. I know it was a late night driving in. So I want to get back to Bad Man's Easy in a second, but I thought we'd start just with something about you, Colin, right? So Flannery O'Connor once wrote that to know oneself is to know one's region. It's also to know the world. And I know a little bit about you, and you've had quite a eclectic global upbringing. So tell us a little bit about how you grew up and how you found your way back to North Carolina.
Cool. So my parents were both in the military. Dad was from North Carolina, mom's from Pennsylvania. So I was born in England, then lived in Virginia, Louisiana, Illinois, Nebraska, back to Virginia, back to Nebraska, back to Virginia, and then moved down to North Carolina for grad school in 2014 at UNC Greensboro. Was with the Virginia National Guard at the time, deployed to Qatar, Romania, and then got out, went and studied in England, went back to Romania to teach. Then the pandemic hit and I said, you know, I think North Carolina's home, and moved back to Greensboro and been there since. So.
And you teach there as well?
I did, yes, I teach community college, so I teach English. So,
that's right.
Yeah.
So I know that you've said to me before that the essays, O'Connor's essays, were particularly impactful for you when you first made your way to Flannery O'Connor. One of the lines in The Fiction Writer in His Country, she says, in the South there are more amateur authors than there are rivers and streams, yes. Which is like characteristic O'Connor. And so I have a series of questions here just about your journey to her. How did you come to O'Connor's work? What was your journey to her? When did you decide to join that stream of singer-songwriters, musicians? And when did you start writing songs about O'Connor's stories?
Cool, yeah. So amateur writers, perhaps, and also amateur songwriters, right? Just as many, rivers and
You're
streams.
professional.
Right? You're professional. Thank you. Yeah, so I first heard of O'Connor probably when I was in high school. There was a songwriter named Steve Taylor. He wrote a lot of like CCM stuff, sort of the edgier side of CCM. He wrote a lot for the Newsboys and stuff, a lot of critiques of the industry too. And he mentioned her in some of his liner notes. I first read her in college. We had a reader's theater, and I was reading like Tolkien and Beowulf and stuff like that. And one of my friends pulls out Good Country People. I was like, I don't know if I like this, but I can tell it's good, right? And then we had a class where one of our professors had us read Violent Married Way and one of her short stories. So that's how I first encountered her, and again, sort of same reaction. And after I graduated, I had a few months before infantry school, and I said, you know what, she's good enough, I'm going to just go ahead and read her novels, her short stories, her essays and letters, and see what I can make of her. And her essays, especially for me, having grown up in so many places, but also having roots in different places. And again, for me, it's mostly the Midwest and the South, was just a really interesting way to think about region and how it shapes us. And also having grown up Pentecostal, and her as a Catholic, which was close in some ways, but also an extremely different perspective on religion from what I've grown up with, and also in how, also a very different perspective on art from what I've grown up with. There were a lot of helpful things there, particularly moving away from a propositional sense of art, like this is what you need to say, to an incarnational or sacramental sort of way of looking at things can just be, and any sort of meaning or divinity can just exist in those things. Yeah.
I love that. And didn't you say that when you first encountered O'Connor, you didn't like her?
Yes. I was like,
which
yes.
I think is common for students as
Oh, yeah.
well.
Yeah. And matter of fact, a local college DJ, we were talking about college radio earlier, bought the Complete Stories after my album came out. My guitarist actually lives next door, and he said, yeah, I was taking out the trash one day and looked over at her trash. It was sitting up on top of that. She tried, didn't like it. So,
So
yeah,
she
she's
was
very
in the
polarized
organ,
about it.
or the trash. Okay.
Right.
So I want to talk about Bad Man's Easy, but was that the first song you wrote that was adapting an O'Connor work?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what was that process like? When did you just reread A Good Man Is Hard to Find, and you were like, the misfit needs a song?
Kind of. So I kind of did my deep dive into her in 2011, 2012. Was at infantry school, fall of 2011 into early 12. Went out to Milledgeville and walked onto Andalusia. I said, yeah, this is my grandparents' farm. Like, I'm very familiar with this place. And she sort of just stuck with me. And then when I was...
because you were stationed, oh goodness, you were stationed in Columbus, Georgia.
Yeah. And yeah, so a bunch of my friends went to go party up in Atlanta. I was like, I'm gonna go use some nerd stuff, and drove out to Milledgeville. It was great. And so 2014, I'm in grad school, and I read an article about Bruce Springsteen and how the Nebraska album was so influenced by his reading of O'Connor in his approach to writing, and that sort of changed how he wrote. And that was a very transitional period for me too. It was my first time sort of living in a place where I had to just find my own community. There weren't any external expectations on me. And O'Connor was an interesting way to sort of write my own story through those characters, because a lot of those characters I found I've either been them or I've known them. So yeah.
And so why the misfit? What was did it just come to you that you would write it from his perspective as you were writing a song? What was that process like? Do you remember?
I think, yeah, what I wanted to explore in that one was, so in a lot of her stories, right, the characters come to a point where they're faced with a choice of how am I going to look at the world, how am I going to look at myself? And I kind of wanted to explore kind of his different options there, right? And not give that answer any more than O'Connor would have, but sort of dig a little bit further into what he may have been thinking about, because again, in some ways, those were different roads that I was looking at too.
Because in some ways,
not murder, but
well, yeah, well, obviously not. But in some ways, in the story, you're getting that sort of interiority from the misfit in his conversations with the grandmother, right?
In that last monologue, yeah.
Yeah, and so you're kind of pulling off that as you're showing into the song. Was it like an organic process of the lyrics came to you? I mean, obviously you sing, what is it? Well, a good man's hard to find, but a bad man's easy, right?
That was the easy part, yeah.
Yeah, that was the easy part. But the rest of the song, what was the kind of lyrical composition process? Was it drafts and drafts and drafts, or did you get the melody first? How did that work?
Yeah, so how it tends to go and what happened with this one is usually it's, a line and a melody, and then from there sort of figuring out where the chord structure wants to go, and then filling out the rest of the story. Like, what are the things that this character is really thinking about, and what are some different ways that we can look at this, and also then just compressing it into one song. Because it's a whole process. I'd say that one, most of my songs come together in 3 or 4 drafts. Yeah, so usually, but some of them, there will be just notes in a notebook, and a couple years later, like Save Your Life and Drive. That one I had the first two verses, and then like a year later, I'm sitting over in the desert waiting on a plane out to Kuwait. Had a guitar. It's like, okay, I think the rest of it's ready to come out. So
these songs were written all over the world.
Yes.
Yeah, as you were deployed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Most of them were in North Carolina, but a few of them got finished shows.
Yeah, that's fascinating to think about O'Connor and Kuwait, right?
Right. I don't think she would have liked it very much.
Yeah, well, who knows? So I want to ask you, because Bad Man's Easy is, would you describe it as an adaptation, an inspiration? Like, why would you describe the song in terms of its relationship to the story?
Yeah, so I would say, and this is probably true of a lot of the songs, the stories are a jumping off point, right? And O'Connor, with the exception of that monologue, right, doesn't always get into a lot of interiority necessarily of her characters. And that's kind of what I was trying to do.
So in addition to A Good Man Is Hard to Find, you have The Lame Shall Enter First in your song Mama Don't Know Where Heaven Is. Right. You have The Enduring Chill in The Cold That's Forever. And you, as you mentioned,
today, right?
Do what?
Fitting for today.
I know, and what's to come, perhaps, right? Okay, and then you have Save Your Life and Drive, which is the life you said to be your own, and other stories that we'll discuss as we move forward. How did you pick the stories? Was it just the ones that you were struck by? Did you go back to them as you were thinking about this full project? After you had Bad Man's Easy, you had the first song, you were like, let me make a concept album out of this.
Yes, so it started off, I wrote 4, so Cold It's Forever, Mama Don't Know, Save Your Life and Drive, and Bad Man's Easy, and put out an EP in 2018, right?
Which was Peacock Feathers, right?
Yeah, Peacock Feathers. And there was a professor at Fordham who liked the idea and wanted to see more of it. And when I came back to North Carolina in 2020, I said, I think this is a project that I want to return to, in part because I was returning to the South, right, after 4 years overseas. I was returning to the U.S. after 4 years overseas, and had a lot to think about and a lot to write down. And again, I think that O'Connor had a lot of things to say, both in her own time, but that extends to our time as well. And in 2020, we were dealing with a lot of those things again, in the open again. And so
I'm interested that you call it Tarwater, which is referencing Frances Marion Tarwater from the Violent Way. And O'Connor writes at one point in that novel, everywhere you go, you'll find water. It wasn't invented yesterday. But remember, water is made from more than one thing. And we could say the same here of Tarwater, right? It's made to also be the title of your album. So why that title? Because I also understand that there's some personal connection to it as well.
Yeah, so Tarwater as a character has always been fascinating to me, in the sense that he's been raised in this sort of mission that he then tries to reject and then is sort of captured back into it. And for a long time as a songwriter, I saw my path somewhat parallel to that, so that's part of it. Also, he doesn't actually show up necessarily in the album as a character, but I've since realized I kind of conflated a bit of Parker and Tarwater in some of my songs too. But also, my dad grew up at the confluence of the Tar River and the Pamlico River, which then runs out to the Pamlico Estuary and the Sound. So yes, there were some local resonances for me too. Eastern North Carolina is very similar to Georgia in a lot of ways too.
It's a great title. I think it's amazing. And the cover art, I don't know, who did the cover art?
Kelly Wills. So she actually taught me banjo and 2023, and she's an amazing artist too, so she's doing some great
Get
stuff.
her some props, right?
Yeah.
Kelly Wills?
Yeah, Kelly Wills, Brainflower Designs, if you want to check out her stuff. She's amazing.
It's a great cover and great album, great title, all those things. Okay, so Parker's Back, which you've already brought up, that story, and I know it's a really important story for you because, I mean, we can see that from the album because you have 3 songs on the album, Parker's Back, A New Tattoo, Parker's Reprise, all inspired by this short story, which is one of her final ones, right? It wasn't actually published till after she had passed away. Do you think you can summarize the story? Like or just say why this story is important to you in terms of its reappearance on the album multiple times?
Right. So I would say when I first read Parker's Back, it was intriguing to me because that's sort of where she laid out her artistic philosophy. She laid out all of her cards, right? You can see what she talked about in her essays working throughout the story, and which was especially intriguing to me, in that sort of her religious sense of art. So early on, that was what intrigued me about it. As I've gotten older and gone back and reread it, and sort of looked back at my life and at his life too, all these parallels start showing up. Raised by revivalist, veteran, returning from the war too, and ultimately, what that story I think is about. There are the religious resonances to it too, but it's ultimately about a man who's trying to find love, right, and to be loved, but can only find it in sort of these lost senses, right, and even at the very end, he does something that he thinks will finally make his wife love him, and she beats him for her, right? So it's an interesting.
Just to get a Byzantine Christ tattoo on his back.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So spoiler alert, he gets the tattoo, and
Sorry. Spoil it.
So he gets this tattoo of Christ on his back, and then his wife, who I see as kind of this sort of Pharisee, right? In the New Testament, you have Pharisees who are all about the word, all about the law. And then when faced with the incarnate Christ, they crucify him. Sarah Ruth, when faced with the incarnate Christ, literally tattooed in his back, and she beats him, right? So there's a lot of different things going on in that story that just remains fascinating to me.
Yeah, and the personal resonances with you in your journey, both in the military and your journey with faith.
Right.
You said recently, in another context, you can never have enough faith, and oftentimes that faith is a mask, never to have to face and explore one's own identity.
Right.
And I don't think you were speaking in the context of Parker's Back,
Okay.
but it seems like that would be part of maybe what's going on in Parker's journey, right? Like that desire to constantly be approved by someone else and not necessarily
Just owning
yourself
right.
and your own relationship to whatever you might call the sacred or the divine.
Exactly. Yeah.
So Parker's Back is really important, and I think we should hear a little bit of it.
Cool. Okay.
So are you ready?
Yeah.
I will start song. This is Parker's Back.
We're thinking the whole song or just a couple verses from it? Do we have
I
time?
probably have time.
All right, cool. So and I'd like to say when I'm playing this at bars that this is a song about a guy and a gal who don't much like each other. He loves his drinking and dancing and sinning. She loves her going to church and praying. Then they go and get married, which I get because I was 23 once too. But throughout the whole story, he won't tell her his real name. He just says, "You can call me O.E." His initials. Of course, by the end of the story, she makes him tell her his name. So it's a song about identity and learning to own who you are, maybe, despite the expectations that have been put on you. I've been running from the name my mama gave me as a child. She wanted her. A godly boy didn't know that God was wild. She tried to drag me to revival, so I ran off to the fleet. It stuck me full of pins and needles, they're still itching in my feet. But the Navy and my mama were the only ones who knew. Something burning deep inside made me tell it straight to you. That Obadiah, Elihu's my name. I've been running from it all my life, and I guess that it's a shame. takes attentive love and this restless heart to tame. And Obadiah, Elihu's my name. Well, you look at me as happy as a cat that stepped in crack. I can't help it if the highway promised more than just its scraps. I don't even like to cook it. Girl, you'd burn up butter beans. You're so damn busy praying you forgot the pork and the collard greens. Somehow I married you, though I'd almost rather die. All I get are words like ice picks, they're still sticking in my side. And Obadiah, Elihu's my name. I've been running from it all my life, and I guess that is a shame. It takes attentive love, this restless heart to tame. And Obadiah, Elihu's my name. Well, we never promised heaven, but this house is cold as hell. How can you love your neighbor if you don't love yourself? And I do confess that I love drinking, cigarettes and sin. I got the image of living God tattooed into my skin. Bet you beat him when you saw him till it burst my brittle heart. His eyes were like a burning light, he'd rather love me in the dark. And Obadiah, Elihu's my name. I've been running from it all my life, and I guess that it's a shame. Sure caught my attention when that tree went up in flames. And Obadiah, Elihu's my name.
Love it.
Thank you.
So, you went back to hark back for that song, right?
Yes.
Obadiah Elihu. But you were among a long tradition, let's say, of songwriters or songtellers, as Dr. Parton might say, who go back to O'Connor, right? Bruce Springsteen, you've already mentioned, Lucinda Williams, Nick Cave, Sufjan Stevens. Why do you think people, songwriters in particular, are so inspired by O'Connor and go back to her as a source for their music?
Yeah, for a lot of different reasons. Like, so Irwin Street just had a great book called Flannery at the Grammys, sort of detailing like he captured as many artists as he possibly could who have been inspired by her. And I think it's for a few different reasons. One, there's sort of that dark Southern Gothic edge to her, right, which a lot of songwriters like, you know, especially influenced like the punk and metal, you know, folks who've been influenced by her. And I think Springsteen too, you know, he talks about, you know, her line, there's just a meanness in the world, right, from the misfit. And that was kind of what captured him. But also, and I think Springsteen saw this too, there is a level of meaning that can exist in the concrete outside of the abstract that she does really well in her writing. And for him, and as well as for me, it was this revelation of, oh, you can just tell the story, you don't have to say what it means, or, you know, and that sometimes just that way of drawing humans, like O'Connor was also a sketcher, also a fantastic painter too, but she talked about sketching as an exercise to help her write, because that's where you see the important lines. And then as a writer too, thinking about, okay, what are the important details that actually need to be in the story to not overtell it, but just draw that quick picture of what's going on here, who this character is through their action.
Like forgetting the collard greens.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that one. I love that one, Parker's back. So I want to ask you, because you're kind of pointing out that attention to detail and the specificities of a given place that you find in O'Connor. I'm going to quote you, if you don't mind, because you said this recently, and I want to ask you about this in terms of how you teach O'Connor, right? So for myself, I would like Tarwater to be seen not as an outright celebration of O'Connor, but as a tribute to her, for the influence she's had on me and so many others, like the folks we just mentioned, in forcing us to see both what she's forced us to see, which is limited by her own time and place, and how she asks us to see, which extends into our time and beyond. Her literary strength was also her social weakness. She was concerned with what is and largely ignored the consideration of what could be in society. And when we talked previously, that's basically what you said, right? That she wasn't really thinking, she didn't see herself as like a person who was conducting prophecy, right? But when you teach O'Connor, I'm wondering, what should we do about perhaps some of the things in O'Connor that are not what we would want to aspire to be, let's say, today?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so I have not had the opportunity to teach her in the classroom. I primarily teach comp and things like that. I did have her on the syllabus when I was teaching in Romania, and then the pandemic hit, so we didn't get to her. But I think that those conversations need to be had, and even in like different art spaces, especially in more religious art spaces, that is a conversation that I'll bring up, because a lot of times they don't want to touch it, right? So it's like, no, we need to talk about these things. So I think talking both about what her own perspective was as a person, how that showed up in her art, and then as particularly in the art, so one, not denying who she was as a person, right? And that's well documented. She documented it herself in her letters. But also looking at what was she critiquing as well. And what she was fundamentally doing was picking up the contradictions in that sense of hierarchy of her own, her own piece of that culture. And I think, and she was also looking at sort of that politics of resentment that her culture was seeing in the 60s, and again is showing up again out in the open today. So I think she's valuable in that sense of saying this is not a new thing. This is a through line throughout, not just the region's history, but throughout the nation's history too. So yeah. Yeah,
and really her character's sort of always aspiring or being led by her as the author to some moment of grace or realization that they make a decision that's human, right? It's complex. It's not good, bad, or otherwise. It's some gradation in between. So speaking of grace and sort of the element of surprise, was there a moment when you were making this album that you were surprised by what you were writing, the production, the songwriters, the musicians? Did something sort of happen that you didn't plan for?
Yes. So first of all, as a project, this was, I think, my most mature project, and also got to bring in a lot of people who I've looked up to for years. Deshaun Hickman, he's an amazing sacred steel player from Mount Airy, North Carolina, and Rebecca Todd, who's an amazing gospel singer originally from Benson. She's up in Nashville now. Mama Molasses, too, is a friend of mine up in Bristol. And one of the most magic moments of the recording process was we were just messing around with Mama Don't Know Where Heaven Is, which I played at this showcase thing that Deshaun was also on. He just started messing around with it on steel guitar. Took it in a completely different direction from the more sort of country initial recording, and he took it gospel. And everyone else just started jumping in on it. I jumped in on it, and I told the producer, I said, go hit record. He only caught like the middle of it, but I felt like it was an excellent coda, sort of fade in, fade out at the end of that to sort of wrap up the album. It was just a magical moment. Yeah,
this gospel tinged moment there at the end. So I want to talk about maybe the penultimate song, which is Run to the River, which, as you know, as I mentioned to you, when I first heard it, I was driving and I was like, oh, I was like, this is beautiful. And so it adapts a short story by O'Connor called The River, which is about a little boy discovering faith for the first time from someone who's not one of his parents and has a kind of tragic ending. And you have said recently that this is one of the songs that feels closest to where you are now. How so?
So kind of opposite the main character in the story, right?
Right.
You know, I was raised in a very particular faith tradition, and since then, between seeing a lot more people, knowing a lot more people, knowing the world a bit better, is, you know, learning to, well, there's a line in there, my faithful feet, you know, basically took exactly where to be, and I don't remember the line, I don't remember how to play it. But that learning to trust yourself and also the world around you, and to learn that sort of communion with the divine, with people and the world around you, as opposed to this abstracted sort of thing in the hereafter, right? Yeah.
Because it's tied to that natural landscape, to that
Right.
place,
Exactly.
to something that's beyond oneself, that's not found necessarily in church or a particular dogma.
Yeah, and I think another big thing to it is being okay with uncertainty and letting the questions sort of live, and even letting the questions guide you, as opposed to, again, my raising, it was very much, these are your answers, these are what guides you, but letting the questions guide you a bit more too. So, yeah.
You want to play Run to the River for us?
Yeah.
Run to the River.
Has anyone ever been chased by a pig before? Oh yeah, how was it?
Huh?
How was it?
It was terrible.
Right? Yeah, terrifying.
It was frightening.
Yeah, so this song, you know, started with this big heady thing about God and morality and all that, and then a pig showed up. My girlfriend's a farmer, and she worked for a while at a pork and beef farm just north of Greensboro. They had this pig named El Chapo. 2 reasons. 1, he was destined to become a pork chop, and 2, he was a bit of an escape artist. And so while I was writing this song, she asked me to come up and help her farm sit, and I said, sure. So we go up there, we've got the feed bucket. He's in a pen, which is just one electric wire around a bunch of trees. And there are like 3 or 4 sows in there too. So he heard us coming, looks at the sows, looks at the wire, looks at us, pushes one of the sows into the wire. She starts squalling, he climbs up over her and starts coming at us. Let me tell you, when you got a 400-pound animal coming at you hungry, it fits in right well with that whole theme of God and mortality. So here's Run to the River. That river is wide, that river is deep, it's got a long way to run before it rolls into the sea. I hear paradise is far away, so I'll follow its call down to the river to pray. Is it wide, is it deep enough to wash my sins away? I don't know. I still go to the river to pray. The city lights, imitate the stars and drown them in the void behind the neon signs and bars. My faithful feet never stray, but led me down the Jordan, down to the river to pray. Is it wide, is it deep enough to wash my sins away? I don't know, but I still go to the river to pray. Stop by a farm where I'd had pen. There was nothing there but a top acre shack and a pig in the pen. That pig got out, chased me down the lane, and I ran, yes I ran, down to the river to pray. Is it wide, is it deep enough to wash my sins away? I don't know, I still go to the river to pray. But is it wide? Is it deep enough to wash my sins away? I don't know. I still go to the river